Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. It's your host, Matt Zahab. We're buzzing as always. Why do I have a huge smile on my face? Well, we have a fellow Torontonian and Canadian on the show today. Super pumped to have Alex Tapscott on the show. Entrepreneur, writer, and seasoned capital markets professional focused on the impact of emerging tech, such as blockchain and crypto, on business, government, and society. I have Alex's book right in front of me. If you haven't grabbed it, do check it out. Digital Asset Revolution, how blockchain is decentralizing finance and disrupting Wall Street. I was at my buddy's place and shout out Mikey G, and it was in his communal library. We were playing some pool. I saw it. I was like, I've always wanted to get this, but I never pulled the trigger. Couldn't put it down. Absolute treat of a book. On top of that, Alex is also the managing director of the digital assets group, 9 Point Partners, one of Canada's leading independent asset management firms. And 9 Point launched the world's first carbon neutral Bitcoin ETF, and that is BITC on the TSX. And he also has another book called Blockchain Revolution, which has been translated into more than 19 languages and has sold more than 500,000 copies worldwide. Lastly, Alex also co-founded the Blockchain Research Institute, also known as BRI, which is a global think tank investigating blockchain strategies, opportunities, and use cases. What a bio. Without further ado, I'm very pleased to welcome Alex Tapscott to the Crypto News Podcast. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the long and generous introduction. I'm happy to be here.
I'm pumped to have you on. We got to set the stage. You know what I mean? You got to do what you got to do. I love when Canadians come on the show. More specifically, I love when someone from my own city that I love, but also not hate, but more love, comes on the show. Crypto in Canada, crypto in Toronto. You are sort of one of the founding fathers. You are at the forefront of this. What's going on in the Toronto crypto scene at the moment? You got any good stories for me? Any buzz going on?
Well, Toronto is a city that at the early days was one of the sort of leading areas where a lot of innovation was happening. And I think a lot of people don't really know that. I'd say today it's probably a shell of its former self, but I don't want to say there's no scene here. There's lots going on. But there was a brief period where it looked like Toronto and Canada might actually lead the blockchain revolution, might actually be a leader in Web3. The entire Ethereum community pretty much was originally Canadian. The founding team of Vitalik Buterin, for example, Joe Lubin, Anthony Diorio, and several others were all based in Toronto. They're all Canadian, Toronto-based people. And for a brief period of time, a lot of the really exciting developments within the Ethereum community and adjacent sort of ecosystem was happening here. It's also worth mentioning that even within Bitcoin, there was a disproportionate number of Canadian Bitcoiners. A lot of the core devs were Canadian. We're a country that, has a great university system, has a highly educated workforce, and has a real interest in new technology. And so it didn't totally surprise me that was the case. But we're also a country that fails tremendously when it comes to embracing homegrown innovation and promoting our homegrown winners. And that's something that is going to cost us. It's the reason why Canada, despite all those benefits, is at the bottom of the leaderboard when it comes to innovation, when it comes to R&D, when it comes to new company formation of unicorns. It's a great place to live. It's a wonderful country, but there's so much more that we could be doing to support our innovators and our entrepreneurs. And that's been true in crypto and Web3 since the beginning.
I follow you on Twitter, and one of my favorite tweets that you ever put out is from about a month and a half ago, September 17th, right around when the ETH merge went live. And the tweet goes as follows: Ethereum is Canada's most successful startup ever and the biggest tech story of the last decade, but it's not celebrated that way here in Canada. Case in point, the Globe and Mail, Canada's national newspaper, barely covered the merge, and south of the border, it was led in the New York Times business section. I think that tweet speaks for itself. Will this ever change? Is it going to take someone like Alex Tapscott to run for parliament and maybe kick Justin Trudeau out and become the new PM to maybe get some good PR on our homegrown talent? Is that ever going to change?
Well, that'll never happen because I don't speak French, unfortunately. You got to be bilingual in this country to run for high office. But I think there's lots that people in the industry can do from the if not from the sidelines, from other important areas, right? So we do have a vibrant private sector. There is a big developer community here. We do have a VC industry in Canada. We do have plenty of people who are advocates for this technology, and I think that there's definitely a role for people like you and me and others to make sure that this is an industry that does take priority. in business and as well as in government. I mean, ultimately, I don't want to sound like I'm suggesting that government should be funding or supporting new technology, though that's actually how things got started in Silicon Valley in the 20th century with the semiconductor industry. Up until the 1970s, NASA was buying more than half the chips manufactured in the US. So there's always been a very close relationship between government and industry. But I think mostly these days, what government can do is create conditions for the private sector to succeed and for industry to succeed. And, it's always helpful when big companies and when large institutions themselves become model users of a technology, when they show a willingness to actually embrace it for its benefits. If you look at the story in Canada, yeah, it's true. When the Ethereum merge happened, this was probably the most important technical sort of technological event of the last decade. Ethereum itself and Bitcoin together are the most important technology story of the last 25 years. Ethereum created an entire industry of decentralized applications and innovations like smart contracts and NFTs, which didn't exist before. And that's kind of important. And so it made sense that it was the lead story on Bloomberg. It made sense that, Bloomberg Business Week just last week on the back of the merge published a 40,000 word essay /book on the subject. And the New York Times ran it as the top business story the whole, couple of days after it happened. In Canada, it was on page 15 of our national newspaper. And it was a throwaway story about how a bunch of small companies in Canada hope to help with the rebranding by showing everyone how green crypto is. And look, that's an important part of it. I think the greening of Ethereum will help to make it easier for big companies to embrace blockchain and embrace decentralized applications. But that was one tiny sliver of the whole story of what was happening. What was happening was that an organization started by a bunch of Canadians that has a market cap that's double the size of Royal Bank, the biggest company in the country, just underwent one of the most important technical and technological innovations of all time. And that's something that barely registered in the sort of local firmament here. And I think that's a huge, huge testament to just how out of touch our leadership is with what's going on in the world and what Canadians are doing.
You're pretty switched on the whole politics side as well. Do we have any leaders at the moment who are potentially on Team Crypto? I know Pierre Poilievre, he's a little, but again, he's Pierre Poilievre. But do we have anyone who's actually on Team Crypto and who has some pretty good legit policies?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's more happening probably at the provincial level. I think in Alberta, if you look, there as a province, see an opportunity to create, more welcoming conditions for innovators. Right. And part of that's something that's a narrative that's played out in the U.S. before, which is, in federal systems like the Canada and the U.S., and our system's technically more federal than the U.S., meaning that power is supposed to be more devolved to the provinces. Like provinces are supposed to be like semi-autonomous in this country. They do have kind of wide latitude to pursue initiatives on their own, pursue different tax regimes, pursue different laws and regulations, as long as they don't interfere with our Constitution. And even there are exceptions, but that's an aside. So Alberta is taking steps to attract innovation. It's trying to create laws that make it easier to clarify where crypto assets fall on the regulatory spectrum and so forth. I would say at the federal level, within the Liberal Party, there's not a lot of people taking this seriously. And I think that crypto, unfortunately, has become a very partisan issue in the last 6 to 12 months. And part of that is because of the trucker protests that happened, earlier in February.
Right.
A lot of some people were funding the protest movement with Bitcoin, and as a result, because the trucker protest was deeply unpopular in this country, a lot of people associated Bitcoin with a bunch of people that they felt didn't reflect their views. Right. And Poilievre who I think is a very intelligent person and is capable of nuance, took a very heavy-handed approach when it came to that issue, and basically, put himself on the side of that issue, and as a result, put the Liberals on the other side when they invoked the Emergencies Act. So basically, what's the state of the discourse around Web3 in this country? It's basically, did you support the trucker protest, which has got nothing to do with anything. It's a completely unrelated subject to the question of, do you believe that blockchains are an important technology innovation? Do you think digital assets have the potential to impact a lot of industries? Do you think there's an opportunity for Canadian entrepreneurs to embrace this technology to create wealth and jobs and to drive innovation and to drive tax revenue and to drive all sorts of other benefits that happen when a country leads in a new industry? That's the stuff that we should be talking about, and instead we've taken it to its base level. So I think that there's blame to be had, to be clear, there's blame to be had on both sides of the political spectrum when it comes to this. I think that in general, we need to elevate the discussion, and that starts with serious people understanding what's really happening here. And so far, I just don't think there's a lot of that going on, frankly.
No, unfortunately, you and I are in the same yacht here, but hopefully things change. And again, we do need, we need policymakers, we need people within Parliament who do want to shake and bake and do pave the crypto way. I am very curious about your journey into the space. In 2017, you co-founded BRI, the Blockchain Research Institute, and you worked at Canaccord. I don't know if that was during that time or before that, but big bank position in Canada, one of the best firms in our country, and you decided to go the crypto route. Was it sort of the same as most, or was there perhaps a different, undercover, under the table reason why you wanted to jump ship and go to the dark side?
Well, it's funny, the dark side, because Canaccord was always considered its own insurgent in the Canadian capital markets. It's not really part of the establishment. As an independent firm that's separate from the banks, we were always trying to fight the banks. So we always viewed ourselves as kind of outsiders. So that's an ironic framing. I joined Canaccord Genuity in 2008, in September of 2008, which was, as most people might remember, who are old enough, right as the financial crisis was really, kicking into full gear. I think 2 weeks after I joined, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And I remember that at the time, my firm, Canaccord, had to make the tough choice of cutting a bunch of people from the staff. Now, we were in way better shape than everyone else. We weren't exposed to mortgage-backed securities. There were other banks going bankrupt, having to get bailouts. We had to do a little downsizing. And I somehow managed to avoid getting fired, even though I only joined recently and I had no value, to add to the company at that point. I was a political science major and I got this job mostly on my charm and good looks. And so I had nothing really, I have nothing of value to add at all. And I remember going to my boss's office and just saying, look, I'm just thankful that you didn't fire me. I haven't done anything to prove myself, but I appreciate you see the long-term whatever. And he's just rolled his eyes and was like, are you kidding me, man? I didn't fire you because you're not worth firing. I spend more money on paper clips than I spend on you. Now he's like, now get the hell out of my office and keep your goddamn head down. So that's what I did for the first 4 months or something. As the shit was hitting the fan all around me, I sort of kept a low profile and emerged in 2009. And the Canadian capital markets were one of the first to emerge from the crisis. And the main reason for that was there was actually a commodity boom that happened shortly after the financial crisis, which has an outsized influence on the Canadian economy because of our extractive industries like oil and gas and mining. And there was, still big demand out of China, which was still at a high growth phase, and they were pumping a ton of stimulus into the economy. And so commodities were doing really well. So we actually had great years, from 2009 through 2012, right in the aftermath of that. So I was at the time working in a sales role. So I was an institutional salesperson. So institutional equity sales. So I would cover institutional investment companies like fund managers in the US and Canada. I carved out a niche for myself covering a lot of New York accounts. It's better lucky than smart. And sometimes the beginner, the beginner's mind works really well. I was calling hedge fund managers that were far more informed than I was and way more experienced than I was, and pitching them on running billions of dollars and pitching them on these harebrained ideas. And for some reason they bought into them. And so as a result, I built a pretty decent practice for myself. in New York, covering like the hedge fund industry, and with some clients in Toronto. Yeah, but basically, this is sort of a long-winded version, but basically in 2013, 14 is when I first started to learn about or first heard about Bitcoin. And
do you remember the moment? Like, was that a specific email or letter that came across your desk?
Do you remember what it was? It was the head trader on our desk, who like turned to me because like I was interested in tech and innovation. You know, I would say like on our teams, one of the people that was more interested in that, maybe because I was younger, but whatever. And so he turned to me and he's like, "What the hell is Bitcoin?" Because he's like, "I got a call from a client. This thing, you know, it's going to the roof." I think it was like the first run from like $10 to $150. Oh, wow. It's not like the first run. This is like the first baby run.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what's Bitcoin. So we looked it up, and I think at the time we decided it was sort of a little too early for prime time. But then, you know, I couldn't get it out of my head. And 2014 is really when I started to drill down on it. And basically became convinced that this was like a cool new thing. It was a new innovation. You know, the underlying technology held a lot of promise to maybe change the industry that I was working in, financial services. And I was at a kind of an inflection point in my career. I was 28 years old. You know, it was deciding what I just finished the CFA. I was like Alex Tapscott, director of institutional sales, CFA, and it was like, wow, I've like made it.
Yeah. But Mom, I made it.
Yeah, it's like, Mom, I made it. But then I was like, wait a minute, did I ever set out to have a career doing this, or did I just think this was my first job out of school? And I basically decided then that, you know, maybe I was making a big disastrous mistake, but that this was my first job and that I was going to try some other stuff. And if I came back to the business and maybe they would take me back, then the worst thing that would happen is lose a couple of earning years, but I'd probably end up back on my feet, pretty much. That was my thinking. And so I started to do some work in the crypto space. Started first actually on a research project that I did with my dad. And there's this whole story there about how we got started thinking about it, because he was interested. He happened to be interested in it at the same time that I was interested in it. We got together on a ski trip in Mont Tremblant.
That's rare. That's the first time I've ever heard of someone getting into crypto or doing research with their old man, with their parents.
It's crazy. Unique in that respect. Yeah, I mean, he's older than I am, obviously, but he's someone who's had an amazing ability to predict what comes next in technology and how it impacts business in the world. So my dad has written 15 books on business and technology. Some of them have been hugely influential, like Paradigm Shift and the Digital Economy and Wikinomics. And so for me to join this project seemed like a great, fun thing to do while I was trying to figure out my next move.
Right.
And that research became the basis for more work that we did together. And then finally, we decided to put the material together with some new stuff into a proposal for a book. And my dad took it to his literary agent, who shopped it around. And Portfolio, which is a Penguin Random House, bought the rights, paid us a big advance, and bought global distribution and said, "Okay, go write the book." So it was kind of like an offer I couldn't refuse, right? It was like I was looking for something new to do. I wanted to be in crypto. I wasn't sure what, and all of a sudden, this opportunity landed in my lap to collaborate with my dad and write a book about this thing that I was really interested in. Now, of course, there were some details like I didn't know how to write a book.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, Alex. Like, how again? It's on my to-do list. It's something I want to do. You know, before I die. What is the process like? How much of a shit show is it? Like, what's your software stack? Talk to me about your creative route.
Stack? Microsoft Word.
Oh, I know. Some people use Notion. You know, some people use Evernote. You could be Google Docs guy, like Google Docs. What about your creative workflow? What do you do to get in the zone?
I'll tell you about it. So
walk me through it.
Yeah. So it's relevant because I'm actually writing a new book right now, which I'm happy to talk more about. Most people don't know this.
Crypto related?
Yeah, Web3. I'll tell you about that in a second. So, well, I mean, look, what technology tools you use? Like, yeah, we use Dropbox, and we used Word, and we used Outlook, and that was about it.
Classic.
We're kind of like low tech when it comes to writing. You just want to make sure you have version control and you don't lose any drafts. That's those are the two most important things. But there's a lot that goes into the research that's kind of interesting. You know, with the first book, Blockchain Revolution, like we had no idea really what we were writing about. I mean, I had written this report called the Bitcoin Governance Network in 2014. And, it explained what Bitcoin was and what I thought were some reasonable steps to help Bitcoin be more successful. And that was, I exhausted all the knowledge I had about Bitcoin in this report. And now we had to write a 100,000 word book about this and explain what it meant for business and society and so forth.
Everything. Yeah.
So we had to interview a lot of people because there was not a lot of primary research. It's not like a lot of academic research or even white papers. Nowadays there's a zillion startups and protocols with white papers, and there's, you can go to Vitalik's blog, or you can go to Andreessen Horowitz, the Crypto Canon, or you can go to, all of these repositories for information. There's all these amazing sources today. You can go to Messari, you can go to The Block, who's got research, and we have our own research institute. Like, there's just tons of stuff. Back then there was nothing.
And you can trust it now. Like back in the day, how do you vet? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a lot of I think it was when something is so early stage and the people behind it just want it to be successful so badly, they'll spin any piece of information into some big positive story. And I think nowadays it's matured enough that we can talk about the good and the bad a little more honestly.
Right.
And so back then, how do you learn about it? Well, you have to talk to people pretty much. And so that's what we did. So we did over 100 interviews for that book. And back then, people were available. And they still are. I mean, I can tell you about what I'm doing right now, but it was a sort of a crypto winter, and it was well before. I think nowadays we go through these cycles. We know that we will emerge on the other side bigger and better and stronger. But back then there was always that feeling like, geez, if I made a terrible mistake, and is this technology really not going to work out? In the industry, I think a lot of people were never had this kind of confidence that they have now. And so you could talk to anybody. So we talked to, the VCs and the founders and the academics. We actually spent a lot of time with the Ethereum community, interviewed Vitalik a couple of times. We were actually in the offices of Consensus Systems in New York when the Genesis block got mined for Ethereum. We were there for the launch. And it was actually our node that the miner in the office there that actually mined the first block, which is pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. But at the time, I mean, I don't know if your listeners know about Consensus, but basically, it was sort of like the big dev shop for Ethereum in the early days. And these days it's really focused on partnership with, so MetaMask, for example, is a thing that came out of Consensus. That's something everybody probably knows in crypto. So it's an organization today that's been backed by JP Morgan and MasterCard or something. Back then, the office was smaller than the office that I'm in right now. And it was me and 4 other people. And 2 of those people were my dad and our editor. So there were 2 or 3 people from Consensus. And the Ethereum network, when it launched, had a implied market cap of $80 million, which was a lot because the token sale priced it much lower than that.
Right.
So this was early days, and honestly at the time, just instead of writing the book, we should have just bought as much ETH as we could and then retired. But, we've done fine. But it's it's just it was a reminder just of how early and how far from guaranteed anything was in the industry at the time. So a lot of interviews and a lot of hypothesizing. We had to we described a whole bunch of imaginary things that didn't exist. We talked about crypto collectibles before the existence of NFTs. We talked about decentralized computing and decentralized power grids before the invention of Filecoin or the invention of Cash or Helium. We talked about a decentralized Uber, which has become a meme in crypto, who's going to invent the next Uber. We actually wrote it up in 2015. We called it Suber. We invented the startup called Uber, Super, that was supposed to be distributed Uber. So we talked about all of these things that didn't exist yet. And because the whole market was $10 billion in size, and Ethereum hadn't even launched when most of our work was done on the book, right? So today it's a lot different. Today there's a lot more that you can hang your hat on. There's a lot more, not only what's written, which is, you can write as much as you want, but there's a lot more stuff going on. There's a lot more applications that are live with users, with assets that have product market fit. There was no stable coins, there was no $20 billion of NFT sales, which is what we've had in the last 18 months. There was no, Hollywood studios embracing crypto, which is what's happening now, or like big banks or payment networks. It was all very early stage at the time. And so things have changed.
It's been so quick. It's bananas.
Yeah.
I got to get into your creative process there. Give me your routine. What do you do? Are you a morning writing guy, at lunch, after work kind of thing? Like, do you have a specific time slot or ritual, coffee, tea? Like, do you do anything to really get you in the zone?
I do a lot of research first. And so like I will speak to a lot of people. We use a service where we get all our interviews transcribed. So we'll get all the interviews transcribed, then we'll pull quotes, and then we'll organize those quotes into like the concepts that we want to use. And then we'll fit, I say we, because I have an editor on my project on this one. We will fit the quotes and the concepts that we've read in books and other sources into an outline. So you have to, like, we always start with like a very annotated outline, like a deep outline. So like a 10,000 word outline for a 100,000 word book. And you try and lay out as many different things that you want to talk about, and reorganize it. So you've already got like an architecture, a framework that you have for the book. You don't just start with a blank page and start writing. You have to, at least this is my process.
Skeleton first.
You create this like very detailed, it's like the skeleton and the nerves, and the marrow and the muscle. And you're trying to add the skin and the eyeballs and the rest of it. Like you're a long way there when you can get the big, hidden stuff done first. So you start with that. Then do a ton of research. And then typically what I'll do is spend, a couple of days a week where I'm writing a lot, usually Fridays and Mondays.
Just lock yourself in the office and grind kind of thing?
Pretty much, yeah. Where I'm just writing, so I can write, when I sit down, I can write 5,000 words in a day. It doesn't mean it's like they're good words, but they're words.
It's 5,000 words, yeah.
So you can but you can only do that once you've done the rest of the hard work. And then the rest of the week, I'll like make the 5,000 words not sound terrible, and try to make them decent, like try and fit them into what you're trying to say. And, you keep doing interviews and you keep reading more and you keep iterating, you keep going back and tinkering and readjusting and moving stuff around. And like this, it's a funny process. I have conversations with my editor, who's also like research collaborator. She sits in on every call we do with with interviewees. Her name's Kirsten Sandberg. She was an executive editor at Harvard Business Press for 15 years, and was the editor on Blockchain Revolution. So she's working with me on this new project as well. And we just collaborate, and it's like an intensive process that consumes your mind and in 9 months of your life, and then in the end it's done, and then you hope it's not a disaster and people like it.
Now you got a beautiful book like this to show the world. Now this book in particular, Digital Asset Revolution, there is so much in this. Now I think it's great for both beginners and vets, and mind you, I'm no vet, but it's easily distillable and it doesn't go on and on about anything. There's just so many different areas of crypto, finance, DeFi, you name it, that's in this book. Is there any particular area at the moment that, that gets you a little hard, that you're very bullish on, that tickles your fancy? I know I've seen you on a couple of podcasts on Cosmos and Atom. Is any protocol, DeFi layer, whatever you want to call it, NFTs, anything that has your eye at the moment?
I would say that I'm really interested right now in like NFT-based storytelling. And in like token gated communities. And that's something that I didn't think I was going to be interested in. I would say that because of my background in financial services, I was more focused on DeFi. We said in the first book that blockchain has the potential to change different elements of the industry, moving money, storing money, lending money, accessing credit, how we, do identity, how we, get access to growth capital, how we trade assets. And so when things like Uniswap came along, or like Aave, or like a Compound, and it was like, oh my God, these are blockchain-based, like decentralized models for lending and for trading and for all those things I just described.
Powerful.
It's like, this is so cool. Yeah. And so that's something that took like a lot of my focus. And NFTs and art and creative content, like in generative art projects and things like that, I didn't pay as much attention to. And I still frankly think that there's a lot of like hot air and kind of BS in that space. But I do think that the idea of tokens as membership in new social networks or new communities, like token gated communities and DAOs, I think is an amazingly powerful concept. And I've also been spending some time looking at and even participating in, like, I'm not a big NFT whale or like a big buy. I'm not like aping into like, I'm not like sweeping floors and buying like thousands of these things, but I do like buy like a thing here or there.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
something that I think is kind of interesting. It's not enough to like really move the needle for me, but I'm just interested in it more like conceptually. And these are projects that I find really interesting. There's one called the MV3 that I'm really interested in. This is like a small project, but basically the founder is a Hollywood screenwriter. She was on the founding screenwriting team for Stranger Things. She wrote the character of Eleven for like 4 years and has a new show on Apple TV that's coming out where she's the lead writer and showrunner. So she's like a big deal screenwriter in Hollywood, and has developed this basically a new cinematic universe of 6,000 characters with about 24 lead characters. And you can actually go and buy a character. And it's basically like, imagine in like 1977, if you'd been able to like buy your own Stormtrooper or buy Boba Fett or something before the movies came out. And so you would get an opportunity to like, to have bragging rights over that, but you'd also potentially get to participate in the economic upside if your character gets used in any content that like makes money. So it's like having IP rights, which is something that exists with NFTs already. And also you can have a say in the creative process. It can be a community created storyline. So the idea basically is like, imagine inverting the entire Hollywood screenwriting model, where instead of the studio having 100% control over the IP, you're basically turning over control of the IP to the fan base. And the idea is like, you live and die in Hollywood on your fans. And so can your fans, by being economic stakeholders in the universe you've created, actually help you to co-create like new stories and to actually like participate in that journey. And that's just the kind of thing that, to me, it's really interesting because it's a reminder that digital assets can be anything. Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz says that they're like containers. You can put, if a website is a container for information, token is a container for value. So what are things that have value? Well, money and gold and stocks and bonds and titles and deeds and loans and other things, financial assets and traditional assets, but art and collectibles and IP and, our identities and votes in an election and maybe even stories in a cinematic universe and characters are things that you can own as assets. And the idea of like community-owned networks and community-owned projects to me is really fascinating. So that's like I'm more like academically interested in that than anything else. And then in terms of specific protocols, I am very positive on the Cosmos space, and part of that maybe is a bias. I know a lot of people in that community. One of the founders is a friend, another Toronto guy. Like that's another one. Like the entire Cosmos project was started out of Toronto. And
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, like
wow,
that's another one. Ethan Buckman is a Canadian kid. Well, not kid anymore. He's an adult like the rest of us. But was a kid from Toronto who had this idea, and he and Jay Kwan launched a token sale, raised $16 million in 10 minutes, and now it's worth $5 billion. And a lot of the founding team was based in Toronto. It's funny. Like I was. This is like total digression, but Ethan and Jay once presented to a group of white-haired Toronto businessmen at this thing called the Creative Destruction Lab at the University of Toronto. And basically the idea was get a bunch of like rich Toronto people together and have a bunch of kids compete for their investment dollars, like a real life Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. And Jay and Ethan were in this program and they got kicked out. They got kicked out because nobody wanted to invest with them. They were willing to basically like pre-sell, like to fund the development of Cosmos, to 10% of the float of all the tokens for like $1 million or something, which today would be worth like $500 million. They were willing to do that for like $1 million or maybe even less at the time, like 200 grand or some like comically small amount. And all these guys were like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like this is all gobbledygook. And they got kicked out. And then 9 months later, they did the token sale and raised 16 million in 10 minutes. And now the thing is, I think one of the most important technology innovations, in the blockchain space. And the reason I think it's interesting is that one of the benefits of crypto is the idea that we are dealing with composable pieces, right? Like Lego blocks. So you can stick all these different, applications together to create, composable liquidity. So you have access to more dollars that are being lent into a pool. So there's, cheaper credit or something like that, like those benefits. And that the pieces can also click together into like a more robust sort of stack of financial applications or Web3 applications. But the reality is that these are built on disparate stacks. So there's like the Ethereum side, then there's the EVM compatible side, but then there's Solana, and then there's Aptos and these other like so-called ETH killers, whatever, that are coming out. And as a result, we have to rely on technologies like bridges as a way to basically connect these different chains together. And bridge basically is like an escrow account where like you put a bunch of money and then you get issued like a wrapped version of a token against it. So the bigger the bridge gets, the bigger a target it becomes, and now that's why we have all these bridge hacks. So basically, having all of these like Ethereum-like protocols where you are beholden to a main chain, like to a global supercomputer blockchain, creates the need for these things. Now, what Cosmos is imagining is a different kind of architecture, simply that applications will have all their own chains. They'll be connected via like a form of interchain security because lots of people are staking assets across different chains. They've got a vested interest in the whole ecosystem. And as a result, projects will have the ability to have composable liquidity without having to rely on bridges. Like you can have the composability because everyone's got their own chain. But you've got some common set of technology, right? And so, to me, that's the kind of architecture that, like, it just inherently seems to make more sense if we're actually going to have, let's say there's a metaverse and there's a different like your instantiation of cryptos. You have an avatar that's an NFT or something, and you own it, and you want to move it between different environments, and those different environments are on different chains. Like, how are you going to do that?
Has to be interoperable.
It has to be interoperable, and it makes more sense if applications have their own chains, basically. So there's much smarter people than me in the Cosmos community that could have maybe articulated that better. But it just seems to make a lot of sense. So we're really interested in that concept.
On a very qualitative side, I'm a big believer of when the smartest people in the room and people 100 times smarter than you are all preaching something. Mind you, of course, there's skin in the game. Yes, a lot of these people who are 100 times smarter than me do have a healthy bag of Adam, but at the end of the day, like there's usually a good reason for it. You know what I mean? Do your research, make sure that they're not just pumping their own bags, and it all checks out on my end. So I'm a big fan as well. Folks, we're going to take a quick break and give a massive shout out to our sponsor of the show, and that is Prime XBT. I've been using Prime XBT for a hot minute, and I absolutely love these guys as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet. You can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promotion for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that is CryptoNews50, CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Let's talk about some traditional stuff for a bit. The dollar milkshake theory. This is a great one. You had a nice little spiel about this, I want to say a month or two ago. Who's the guy on Twitter? What is it? Santiago Fund, who's always bumping it? There's one. Yeah, he's I don't know his real name, but he is always pushing this. You could explain it a hell of a lot better than I can. I'd love if you could give our listeners a quick little rundown of the dollar milkshake theory and what is currently happening in sort of the macro FX market.
Well, the dollar milkshake theory is not a theory, it's a fact. And it had a different name before this guy came up with this milkshake concept. I think it's better just to call it the dollar steamroller theory, which is basically whenever there's like a global financial crisis or liquidity crisis, that the US dollar does extremely well. And it does very well at the expense of other assets, and especially risk assets, and especially stocks. So, it starts with risk assets, but then it spreads to other currencies. So emerging market currencies are trading at very historic lows relative to the dollar. It spread into fixed income because of the concerns around rising rates. And all of these things are interrelated, obviously. And then it spreads into other currencies. So you've seen, the yen and the euro and the pound trading near historic lows against the dollar. And those are assets that are supposed to be themselves sort of like reserve currencies in the world. So what hope does Bitcoin and other crypto, which has a collective market cap of less than $1 trillion, have when you've got this giant million-pound steamroller squishing everything in its sight? So this is something we've seen play out. And if you want to look to crypto specifically, just point to March 2020. Financial conditions were at a historically tight level. Actually, recently they've been almost as tight as they were back then, which suggests that maybe we're in the sort of the worst of the pain and that an ending is in sight. We'll see about that. And it happened in 2008, and it happened in 1998, and it happened in 2001, and it happened in 1980s. Like you could go back through time, modern history, right? Every time there's like a global financial crisis or squeeze, like 98, it was the long-term capital management, the Asian currency crisis, and all these Asian tiger economies Thailand and Taiwan and Korea, like all the currencies got completely obliterated.
Squashed,
The milkshake's been around. The milkshake's been churning for some time, or gets turned on once in a while. And so this to me is really nothing new. So we need like an intervention or a easing of financial conditions. I thought maybe we were in store for that. Like the dollar had rolled off pretty hard going into the Fed announcement on Wednesday, but then the Fed announcement turned out to be not as dovish as people thought. And now we're in a position once again where the dollar is retesting new highs. So we're basically kind of back in the same place. So the milkshake theory is alive and well for sure.
Why is it called milkshake though?
Like I don't know. I think the idea is like you put all these other assets into a blender and they just get like turned into goo. Like that's the best I've got for why it's called the milkshake theory.
Like it's sort of catchy, but again, it has to make sense. Steamroller
the steamroller theory is a better idea.
It's weird. Maybe I'll fire him a DM. I'll see why he coined it the milkshake theory. Twitter. We're both big Twitter guys. You're way bigger than I am. I'm not big on Twitter. You are big on Twitter. Twitter is the GOAT of crypto. It's so much fun to be on. Such a great place to learn. Do you think Musk is going to implement some Dogecoin payments or perhaps a Twitter native token now after he removes trading from NYSE and has full control over it? You think he has any tricks up his sleeves?
No. I don't see any, not in the short term, any sort of potential for crypto integration into Twitter any more than what we've already seen. I mean, they had like NFT PFPs, right? Provable NFT PFPs already, I think. Pretty little adoption there.
Yeah, the Hexagon, but that's, such a small subset of the overall users.
I know.
How's Twitter going to make money besides this $8 a month thing?
I don't know. Advertising. How else do social media companies make money? I think I should not say with such confidence what Elon Musk will or will not do, because if history has taught us anything, it's that the guy is highly unpredictable and, he's a very creative person and kind of loves anarchy. So would probably try all sorts of ideas if it could, shake things up and irritate some people and maybe make him a lot of money in the process, right? So I think that if a Web3 concept, whatever that might be, tipping with Dogecoin or, some sort of like Twitter token that you can earn as being like a top producer, I think that would be making a lot of sense, like a governance token. Twitter really, in my view, would probably work better as a user-owned network, as a protocol, where instead of paying $8 a month, people who are contributing a lot of value to the platform actually get compensated back instead. And you might be able to do both. Like it could be possible that the $8 a month is just a way to like do KYC and verify people to prevent bots and frauds. But then on the back end, if they had a token that, top producers could actually earn a piece of that content. I think that's potentially a way that it could be integrated. Dogecoin is payments. Like I really would not, I don't know, but I would put very little stock in that as any kind of thing that will work. Dogecoin's just a Bitcoin fork. Sure, it's got a higher TPS, but like it's not there yet when it comes to like payments. It would make more sense if there was like tipping with USDC or something. That would honestly make more sense than Dogecoin. But like I said, he's a highly unpredictable person, so you do never know.
He is, yeah. He's Elon's often on his rocker in the best of ways.
Yeah.
Alex, this has been a treat. I know we're getting tight for time here. We have a segment on the show called the Hot Take Factory. Let's put our shit kicking boots on. We'll jump in the factory. Give me an Alex Tapscott hot take. Doesn't have to be finance or crypto related. Can be food, politics, sports, geography, you name it. Give me a couple good hot takes.
A hot take?
Yeah.
Well, this might not be a hot take, but I think the Toronto Raptors have a chance of winning the NBA Finals this year. I don't know if anybody cares about sports, but I've been watching them play. Watching them play in the first few games, yeah, this year, like they're really starting to click. And I think like we're one trade away from being like one of the top 2 teams in the East. And I think that we could easily make it all the way. So that's just like a little sports tidbit. You know, when it comes to Web3 and crypto, the one thing that I'm really looking forward to or keeping an eye on the next year is enterprise adoption of public blockchains. So we've been through this before where we've talked about like big companies buying into like blockchain as a concept, but then going and building their own consortiums or something like that, or building their own chains. What we're seeing now is that more and more big companies are embracing public blockchains. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, the technology's more and more capable and ready for prime time. And so like if you're Starbucks or Nike or LVMH or some other big company, you actually see like a path to like getting a business case built on this platform and on this technology. Number two is that I think that the move from proof of work to proof of stake and the greening of Ethereum, quote unquote, has definitely removed a key obstacle for a lot of corporate leaders, especially of publicly traded companies that are like consumer facing, who frankly have to worry about these issues. And so they should, about the footprint of you know, what technology they're using. And then the third thing would be that just the rise of NFTs in general have really lowered the barriers to doing cool stuff in crypto without having to like reinvent the entire wheel. Like you can launch an NFT project and you know, engage with maybe a community online you didn't engage with, or like engage with your existing customer base in a more sort of novel and creative way. And I think that's become a really easy way to do it. And I also would just say that like I think at this stage the cat is so out of the bag that it really doesn't matter what the price level is in crypto. Like we're going to see way more Web3 initiatives in the next little while. And you just have to point to what's happened in recent memory. Like just this week, we saw Fidelity launching its zero-fee crypto trading platform. We saw Facebook Meta launching NFTs for Instagram. We saw last week MasterCard with a couple of big announcements. You know, so basically there's a lot of big enterprises announcing stuff, and what would normally be considered the bottom of a bear market, or like, you know, towards the bottom of a bear market. And that I think is interesting because the two factors are no longer correlated. It's like, number went down, so like companies are out on crypto. Just listen to what the MasterCard head of payments and risk said. He's like, in 5 years' time, this asset class is going to be way bigger than it is today. You know, price is not important to us. Something like to the effect of like, the fact that prices are down today is irrelevant. We're going to keep on keeping on with what we're doing. And I think that's basically the thesis in a lot of big companies. So, you know, it would be, there's some irony in relying on corporations to be, you know, buyers of an asset or users of a technology that's supposed to decentralize the economy and decentralize markets. The fact of the matter is, like, if you want this technology to change the world, having global Fortune 50 companies jump on board, it's probably not a bad thing. And by the way, like, this isn't just about, so it's like, what does this have got to do with the market and price and value and so forth? It's like, well, you know, if companies are going to start using networks like Ethereum in a substantive way, like in a real way, where they're, you know, running applications, maybe they want to be, you know, a validator. Maybe they want to stake ETH. Maybe they need ETH to pay for gas fees, you know, to run transactions for their customer base. All of those things are demand side drivers of buying ETH, right? So like, it's not just a press release. It may just be a press release or, you know, whatever, an opportunity to sort of like do some innovative, you know, cosplay for those companies. But if it leads to real stuff, and we're seeing that in a lot of instances, Nike and Starbucks are a couple of good examples, then it's going to lead to like a demand side push into the tokens, which is going to drive the entire market value higher as well, right? So this isn't just about hand waving and look, companies are validating our idea. It's actually, they could be net buyers of the actual asset class, which in a way is being users of the technology, right? Those two things are interrelated, obviously.
It's wins across the board. You'd love to see that. Got to go back to the Raps for a sec. Why do you think we're so good? I can't see us getting past Milwaukee.
Well, I say we're one trade away from being one of the top two teams in the East, right?
Top two, gotcha. Okay.
So I think that, and then you never know, like in a finals, like I think I think there's a couple of things. One is a trade, and then another thing would be Scotty Barnes. So like if Scotty Barnes can make a big leap this year from his season last year to like a top 20 guy in the league, that means we have two top 20 guys in the league. Because I think Pascal's going to have a lights out season. He's already showing that.
Yeah.
And then you've got a supporting cast. And I think that, we're a funny team. We're a bunch of like tall, big, athletic forwards. I don't know what the missing piece is, but I just think that like we could compete. And then I think the East is actually stronger than the West this year. I think Boston is still a threat. I think that Milwaukee's obviously like the cream of the crop so far. In the West, Golden State, obviously defending champs, but I think teams are beatable. Like I don't know. I think we're a decent dark horse to make a deep push into the playoffs. I think if you look at the rest of the East, other than Milwaukee, I think we can beat them all. Right? Like I think Philadelphia and Brooklyn's a shit show, and Boston's coming off of the coach just leaving, and who knows how they'll react to that. They're still very good, obviously, but there's a window of opportunity there that I think is kind of interesting. And then in the West, I'd say like most teams have probably made a regression. I think Golden State's probably about the same as they were. So who knows? We might get to the Eastern Conference Finals and get swept out by Milwaukee, but. Stranger things have happened. So I'm pretty bullish on the Raps this year.
Love it. Maybe we'll see a 9-point sponsorship on the Raps. That'd be a treat.
Yeah, maybe. Unlikely.
9-point takes over the current jersey sponsor. That would be electric. I'd love to see. Imagine if ETH did that. I'd love to see a big crypto sponsor for some Canadian. I know BitBuy did some auto sender stuff and whatnot, but Alex, what a treat, man. Really appreciate your time. Just some incredible knowledge left, right, and center. Truly appreciate it. Before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you and all of your ventures online and on socials?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best place is on Twitter, as you mentioned, at Alex Tapscott. You can also check out our website for 9pointdigital.9point.com. That's where you can learn about our Bitcoin ETF and our other initiatives that we'll be announcing soon. You can also check out our podcast, DeFi Decoded, on YouTube, on the 9 Point Partners YouTube channel, and wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. We have a terrific show on that. We typically interview some like great guests. We've had a number of people from the Cosmos community. We've had, Anatoly Yakovenko, the founder of Solana. We've had top VCs in the industry. We usually just have great guests on that show. So I'd strongly encourage you to check that out. And this has been fun, Matt. I really appreciate the invite. I hope we can do it again.
Yes, we'll do round 2 in person. We'll get some good content going, and we'll blast that for all the young kids on TikTok, and we'll go viral. Alex, appreciate it, man. Great time. And folks, grab Digital Asset Revolution at your closest bookstore or online. And do we have a title for the new book yet? Or is that TBD?
TBD at this point.
TBD.
The Web3 book.
The Web3 book. When it comes out, Alex will be on for round 2. Alex, really appreciate it, man. All the best.
All right, take care. Yeah.
Folks, what an incredible episode with Alex Tapscott. As always, I will include everything important and relevant in the show notes. This will be available on everything. And if you love this, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. And listeners, you are the GOATs. Appreciate you, love you. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.